Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast. I'm Conrad Olsen, founder and editor-in-chief of Scandinavian Mind. Today we are revisiting a talk from the Transformation Conference, a fashion tech event we hosted together with Uni Communication in Stockholm back in August. In the midst of the most transformative period that fashion has ever seen, we wanted to explore how Finland and Sweden could deepen their impact on the industry together. This panel talk was titled, "What are investors looking for?" One of the most important things to help drive transformation is the connection between innovation and capital. We need forward-thinking investors and venture capitalists in order to foster companies with new solutions for the fashion industry. So we invited 3 leading investors to talk about what they are looking for in startups and new companies. They were Nora Bavey, co-founder of Unconventional Ventures, Erik Karlsson, VC investor at H&amp Collab, and Samira Aissi, investment manager for SEB Greentech VC. In this conversation, we talk about what kind of new technologies and business models they are looking for as investors, the process of choosing a company to invest in, the criteria for a good startup, how Nordic countries measure up in a global context, the similarities between Finland and Sweden, and much more. I'd like to thank Helsinki Partners and Stockholm Fashion District for making this possible. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter to learn about upcoming talks and events. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. We'll be back soon with another season of our regular programming in the podcast feed. Until then, here now our panel with Nora Bavey, Erik Karlsson, and Samira Aissi. Enjoy. I thought I'd start with you, Nora, because you are actually the bona fide cover star here today. As you've all seen, Nora was. We were very happy to have Nora on the cover of our latest issue. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and the operations that you represent. But Nora, just start with you because you recently announced your fund, right?
Yes. So hi everyone. My name is Nora Bavey. I still get emotional when I see that picture because people like me never make the cover. So there's a long story to that. I'm a co-founder of Unconventional Ventures, Nordic VC, focusing on impact tech companies built by diverse founders, or underrepresented founders is the key word, but I think what we should talk about is historically excluded founders, and that is women, people of color, immigrants, LGBTQ+, and so on.
Wonderful. We'll get back to that. There's so much to talk about. Samira, you also recently started a new job, so congratulations to that. Talk about what your role is there.
Yes, so I'm investing for SEB Greentech, and we're looking for companies, innovative companies, early stage, who are contributing to climate change mitigation and also transgressing the planetary boundaries.
Wonderful. Do you like your new job?
I love it.
And Erik, you perhaps most rooted in the fashion industry of all 3 here. Talk about your role at H&amp Group and how the Collab entity fits into the whole universe there.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, I'm Erik. I work for H&amp Collab, we're basically the venture investment arm of the H&amp Group. And we're investing in 3 different areas across our industry. So it's sustainable fashion, which is the category that I head up. And we're investing there in order to find companies that can help us meet our sustainability targets. And then new retail, we're looking for, what are the future business models of the fashion and retail industries. And the 3rd category we call enablers, and that's about strengthening our customer offer in different ways or being more efficient internally.
You actually have some of your investments here today, right?
Yeah.
A couple of companies.
Nora and Petri. Nora from Renewcell and Petri from IFC.
It's great to hear.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow up on that. When you work with these investments, I think many people are wondering, is it mostly for the benefit of the greater H&M group, or as you mentioned, is it for the fashion industry as a whole? How is your perspective on that?
Yeah, we never want any exclusivity when we invest in companies. It wouldn't make sense as an investor, because we want the companies to be able to grow into, as big companies as possible. And also, it wouldn't make sense for us, because our ambition is to be at the forefront of leading the industry to change, and we want the whole industry to be able to change. So yeah, no exclusivity.
No exclusivity. And can you give us some examples of types of technologies or companies that you are looking for right now?
All kinds. I mean, within sustainable fashion, we have invested quite a lot in like recycling technologies, new types of innovative materials like Renewcell and Infinited Fiber Company. We have invested in 2 companies that do new types of dyeing technologies. And yeah, it doesn't need to be just materials and processing, but it can be anything that has to do with sustainability.
And is there anything that you are looking for right now that's not in your portfolio, that new type of technology? Maybe you can't reveal that.
No, yeah,
colleagues here.
That's fine. We're happy to speak to everyone. But I'm really interested in how do we take the next steps within transparency and traceability. We've looked at a few companies in that area, but we haven't invested in any so far. So that would be really interesting.
Samira, I'm going to move over to you. I mean, SEB Greentech sounds like a big, huge sort of chunk to be a part of. Are you looking at specifically fashion as well, or how does that fit into the whole area you're looking for?
Yes, so fashion is interesting to us since it's about 4% of global GHG emissions. And we are mostly focusing on the deep tech and hardware part, making all kinds of upstream solutions interesting, like the ones you're mentioning, but like this one, Spinova, new materials, new ways of producing, energy savings, and so forth. Of course, circularity is really interesting to us.
And can you describe the process for choosing which company to invest in? Do you have like a checklist, or is there a way of working?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, one part is to partner with Erik and other investors like Nora as well. And also looking at the sustainability scope, so really, or impact scope, if you would say, at what scale, how sustainable and future-proof is the financial model and so forth. And then, of course, the team is really important to us.
We're going to talk about scale also further out in the program, but this to me is something that's crucial for fashion industry's issues. So is that particular, you don't want solutions that are minor, it needs to be sort of expanded onto the whole industry?
Well, that's an interesting question, because minor things in this space can actually have quite big effects or large effects at scale, but we're mostly interested in platform solutions. So solutions that are maybe not only subject to one single product, but that can be scaled upon multiple applications.
We're going to get back to that, and guys, feel free to play off of each other as comments. But Nora, I want to go back to Unconventional Ventures and the work you've done there. You released a report, I think it was last year by now, right? That is kind of the foundation of your perspective. Can you talk about that report, the findings, and what you kind of aim to do about it?
So I think 2 things. I mean, if we want to change something, and we saw a great presentation about systemic change, and that's what we're all about, we really need to know where we're at to understand where we want to go. And you can have as many visions as possible, but you also have to know what has been done prior and why it's not working. So as a venture capitalist, we took a deep dive at the funding gap, looking into what are the metrics and what is going on in an industry. And last year was our third report, actually next one being launched within a month, and it's not looking beautiful, but it tells us the story and the data that we need to order understand how to improve. So as an example, I mean, we've been very progressive in the Nordics, and we love to talk about, you know, how gender equal we are compared to the world, but unfortunately only less than 1% of all capital goes to sole female founders. Now, it can't be the 99% of all white men are doing better than women, as an example. There's something wrong there. And if we look at the profitability or even, you know, how incredibly well female-founded companies are doing, then we can see in the Nordics, as an example, I mean, the global number is 2.5 times better. In the Nordics, it's 45% better in terms of revenue compared to male-founded companies. So, I mean, if investors are really about making great business decisions, then we're literally not making great. So why is that? So we're really moving into this space with a top-down approach as well as supporting the bottom-up approach. So being closest to the capital was the only way we knew how to create that systemic change.
Wonderful. Or not wonderful. The situation is not wonderful. The work you do is wonderful. Sorry about that. But so talk about how you are addressing this. You mentioned sort of bottoms up and top down as well. How do you go about that?
Of course. So obviously bottom up is the founders that we invest in. That's one part of it. But I think in order to create any kind of change, it's not on a soul. It's not just us that is going to be the change makers. We need to create transparency as we do in all type of industries. And we need to build an inclusive ecosystem where we're all stakeholders collaborating. And when we talk about stakeholders, we talk about all investors. Obviously the bigger funds and the later stage investors, but also stakeholders like institutional capital and private capital. So I think what we're setting out to do, not only great business decisions, but really creating that inclusive infrastructure. And that's what we're trying to do. Impact. So we have these 3 layers, as I mentioned. So it's the ecosystem, it's what we represent, because representation matters, and that is incredibly catalytic, but also the founders that we invest in.
And in types of, is it all types of companies, all types of technologies? How do you pick and choose?
How do we pick and choose? Well, we have some soft spots, obviously, fashion tech being one of them as an impact investor, and with an ESG lens, we really closely look into fashion tech. So we invested in a company called EasySize, which is actually a sizing tool. So it's a plug and play. And what it does really is actually minimizing returns by 30 to 40%. And that is a huge race that is literally being creating incredible numbers also for the SMBs that is collaborating. But we are looking into this space very closely. Obviously, transparency, and I think you kind of mentioned what we're also looking into. But there are also some other aspects. I mean, within health tech, femtech is really important for us. When we look at ed tech, when we talk about fintech, we don't talk about it. We talk about inclusive fintech. So that's beyond, And I think what we do is that we are adding both the environmental and social aspect to it. So ethics, I know it's a big elephant in the room, but ethics is a huge part of what we look at as well. So I think one thing that has really been lost in all of the industries that we look at is really the social aspect of it. And that's where we see that we can really drive change, because it's both important for growth, it's both important for the DNA of what products and services we're seeing, and it's also part of really being part of that sustainable and equal world that we want to be part of. And it starts with equality, ownership, equity.
And you are to be defined as kind of like an up-and-comer in the investment space, so to speak. And Samira, you represent something more of something established, so to speak. Do you bring in some of these perspectives when you go into SEB, for instance? Do you recognize yourself in Nora's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's key for successful investments as well. And I've been working with a concept called gender lens investing, which is basically looking at founders and also capital going into companies and so forth in each investment you do. So there are some quite interesting initiatives, but this is absolutely a success factor.
Wonderful. I want to go back to this whole notion of I'm so curious about how you go about choosing the companies and what criteria and what processes. We have a lot of companies here today, some of them well-funded, some of them more in the beginning of their journey. And I know also we have in the audience people who work with startups and are looking to go into finding capital. So Erik, maybe we start with you. Can you go a little bit more granular in terms of how you go about assessing the companies that you because I'm sure you say no to a lot of them, right? What makes a no and what makes a yes?
I think there's no set formula to how we work. Honestly,
isn't there? I thought it was.
No, there's not like a list that we take off, but I think there is gut feeling. There is the experience of the investment team, and there's for us as a strategic investor, there's the knowledge about what is strategically important to the H&M Group.
Right.
And then of course we analyze the business case, we do our due diligence, legal, financial, that kind of stuff, and then when we in the investment team we feel like okay, we have a good case here, we put together a deck and we present that to our investment committee, and they make the decision. Sorry if I disappoint, but there's no and it looks different every time. Sometimes we do the due diligence, before the IC, and sometimes after.
Right.
And sometimes we meet a company like Renewcell, for example. We met them the first time in 2012. They were looking for capital and took us until 2017 until we invested. It doesn't need to take 5 years, but it can be months as well. So the process is very different for us.
Will you give advice to a company that you perhaps say no to, or say not right now, we have to wait until this happens and so forth?
Exactly, yeah. That often happens, that we say, what you're doing is really interesting. Here's what we would like to see before we invest. And that can be different things. Yeah.
Right. Samira, back to you. Is there checklist? Is there formula? No?
Formulas, yeah. No, if we had that, I think we would be very successful, all of us, in all our investments. Right. But I think that get to know the company and really the team, the founders, but also other key stakeholders, and follow them over time, that would be like the key success factor, I would say, and really see that they get the traction that they are promising to get. In many cases, we get companies that want to have or need capital, but they need it like yesterday.
Right.
So we're closing this in September. They're saying there's no way for us to be able to make decisions that fast, or very seldom at least. So giving us a long runway and follow companies for a long time, that's really a good one.
So have patience and build relationships over time. That's a good tip.
Yeah. And generally, if we look at our investments, we look at if the investments give a lot of impact at high scale, we can take on more revenue risk. And if we have the opposite relation, then of course we want to be much safer on the financial returns.
Nora, can you give, you recently started, and I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think you might invest earlier stages than your colleagues here as well. So I'm sure that maybe you have some companies that are like, I need it now, tomorrow, yesterday.
Exactly. So we go in at pre-seed and seed, and pre-seed might be even pre-seed. And yes, we're at early stages. We invested in 10 companies, but now we have a proper fund. So I'm really looking forward to being more of a catalytic investor. And maybe I think, one thing that dawned on me when I entered this space, because I've literally come from founder perspective and became an investor, was that it really isn't a formula. And that's, both positive and scary sometimes. But I think what we really look at, and that's kind of a very holistic approach from Unconventional Ventures, we really look at how much they've been able to achieve without capital. And how much more are they able to achieve with that capital? Because the capital really becomes a tool and not a necessity for that company or product or service to exist, which tells us that they're, by default, are actually coming from a problem-centric, right? So they're really coming from a customer-centric approach to that problem. And then also realizing, you know, what kind of competencies do we have in-house to be able to be that kind of support to them and the ecosystem we can build around them. So that's the approach that we have at really early stages.
Let's talk a little bit about the Nordic perspective here. Obviously, we are here sort of celebrating the connection between Sweden and Finland, and that's what we want to do. How do you look at you know, the Nordic landscape in terms of innovation and you know, interesting companies? How do we measure up from a global perspective? I want to ask this to everyone, so maybe start with you, Erik.
Really well, I think. It's. I mean, we have some legacy industries in both Finland and Sweden, like, you know, the forest industry, the cellulosic industry. In Sweden, we have the car industry, and we see that, you know, they act as a base for a lot of the innovation that's popping up. And I think, you know, we have a lot of good examples of you know, startups that have made it big. Like, you know, we have Klarna, we have Rovio in Finland, we have Spotify, and I think they also that acts as an inspiration to young entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs today, they're fearless because they know, and I think that in a good way, you know, they know that they can make it, and they probably think they have a formula for making it, and I think that's a real positive force in this ecosystem.
Samira, same question. How do we do here in the Nordics?
Yeah, I think we're doing well as well. And what we also see is like second and third round entrepreneurs who are really experienced, which also brings a lot of value into the market. We see that Sweden has been leading startup-wise, but Finland is really catching up and quite big internationally as well. And all our companies, almost all of them, are going international, which is a really good success factor to us, reaching large markets from start.
Again, with the scale.
Yeah.
Nora, do you look at companies from all over the world or all over the Nordics? What's your perspective?
Well, we'll take a look at from a European perspective, and I would say from a global perspective, obviously we have very close relationship with the US as an example, because they're in the forefront when it comes to the whole diversity aspect in investing. Not that they're doing better, they're just having very much open conversations than we're having. So I would say, and I hate to be the one to drag it down, we have everything in place to be the world leaders. There's nothing that we cannot lead in the conversation of, you know, really doing well, but we're unfortunately very fat and happy. We think that the formula that we've been using, you know, scaling at all costs, is what should continue. And now the question is, we need to mend at all costs. And what are we, you know, what are we deciding to do when knowing that it is not business as usual? And I would love it if the Nordics could really take advantage of the diversity impact that has a direct link to profitability and revenue and innovation. But it's like we're seeing it, we're pretending that can wait.
All right, thanks, guys. We're now going to do a deep dive into some of these new exciting companies. Nora Bavey, Samira Aissi, and Erik Karlsson, thank you so much for coming here today. It's been a treat.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Scandinavian Mind podcast with me, Conrad Olsson. This show was edited by Erik Sedin. If you liked what you heard, follow us on your preferred podcast app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. To get the latest news, insights, and invites to upcoming events, sign up to our newsletter. Just go to scandinavianmind.com to become part of our movement.